There's a specific moment every single day where your entire life gets decided, and it lasts about 4 seconds. It's the moment between knowing what you should do and doing it. You wake up and there's the thought, get up, start, move. And then there's a tiny gap, a pause. And in that pause, a voice shows up and starts talking. 5 more minutes. You're tired. Start tomorrow. It's not that important. You deserve a break. Almost nobody realizes this. You don't lose to that voice because it's strong. You lose because you let it speak at all. The second you open negotiations, you've already lost. Procrastination isn't a willpower problem. It's a timing problem. You're trying to win an argument you should never have started. Almost 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor figured out how to shut that voice down before it could open its mouth. A man who ran the most powerful empire on earth while dying slowly on a freezing war front. He wrote the trick to himself, in private, in a notebook he never meant for anyone to read. Just a few lines, scribbled at dawn, on the days he didn't want to get out of bed. Because yes, the most powerful man in the world also didn't want to get out of bed. He just had a rule for it. That rule can kill procrastination in seconds. Not with motivation, not with discipline you don't have yet, with timing, with a single command you give yourself before your brain is awake enough to argue back. His name was Marcus Aurelius. Let me show you exactly what he did and how to steal it. Let's clear something up first because it matters. You are not lazy. I mean that. The proof is simple. Think about how much energy you burn avoiding the thing you're supposed to do. The dread, the bargaining, the 40 browser tabs, the way you'll clean your entire kitchen to avoid sending one email. Lazy people don't do that. Lazy people feel nothing. You feel everything. That's the problem. So if it isn't laziness, what is it? It's negotiation. Every act of procrastination is a tiny negotiation between two versions of you. There's the you that already decided, the one who knows the workout matters, the email matters, the work matters. And then there's a second voice that shows up after the decision is made and reopens the case, asks for terms. Do we have to do this now? Couldn't we do it later when we feel better? Here's the trap. That voice is patient. It's reasonable, and it always sounds like you. It never says, don't do it. That would be too obvious. You'd catch it. Instead, it says, do it later. Later feels like a yes. Later feels responsible. But later is just no wearing a disguise. Watch how it actually works in real time. You sit down to start. Within seconds, the voice offers its first move. Let me just check one thing first. Reasonable. You check. Now the voice has momentum, so it raises the stakes. You're not really in the right headspace, are you? You'll do better after you've eaten, after this video, after the weekend, and every single offer sounds like it's on your side. It's framing delay as self-care, as wisdom, as timing. By the time you realize what happened, the morning's gone. The part that actually costs you isn't the lost hour. It's what the lost hour teaches your brain. Every time you negotiate and lose, you train yourself. You teach your own nervous system that the uncomfortable thing is, in fact, optional, that the rule can be bent. Tomorrow, the voice comes back louder because last time it worked. Procrastination compounds, not the tasks, the habit of flinching. You're not just behind on your to-do list, you're slowly teaching yourself that you're the kind of person who doesn't follow through, and that belief becomes the heaviest thing you carry. So the real enemy was never the task. The task is fine, the enemy is the gap, that little pause between the decision and the action, because the gap is where the negotiation lives. Close it, and there's nowhere for the voice to stand. Marcus understood this exactly, but to see why his fix works, you have to understand why the gap exists in the first place. Here's a way to think about it. I want to be honest. This is a simplification, not a neuroscience lecture, but it's a useful one. Your brain has two jobs that are constantly in tension. One part of you is built for long-term thinking, goals, values, the future, the person you want to become. The other part is built for right now, comfort, safety, avoiding anything that feels like pain or effort in this exact moment. And effort, to that older part of the brain, registers as a kind of threat. Not a tiger, but a cost. Something to be avoided if possible. When you face a hard task, the present-focused part doesn't shout no. It's smarter than that. It buys time. It introduces a delay, because in that delay, it can win without ever looking like the villain. Delay feels neutral. Delay feels safe. The longer the gap stays open, the more time that part of you has to manufacture reasons. This is why you can be a genuinely intelligent person and still lose to procrastination every day. Intelligence actually makes it worse because a smart brain is a better lawyer. It can build a more convincing case for why doing it tomorrow is the rational choice. The dumber you are, the harder it is to talk yourself out of things. Your cleverness is being turned against you. The modern world has taken this small leak and turned it into a flood. Think about what's sitting in your pocket. Every time the gap opens, that tiny moment of "I should start," there is a device engineered by thousands of the smartest people alive, built specifically to fill that gap with something easier. The pause used to be empty. Now it's a slot machine. The voice doesn't even have to talk you out of the task anymore. It just has to get you to glance at your phone for 1 second, and the algorithm takes it from there. Let's name the mechanism clearly, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Procrastination is not a moral failing. It's a sequence. Step 1, you face something effortful. Step 2, a gap opens between you and the action. Step 3, in that gap, the comfort-seeking part of you generates a reason to delay. Step 4, the reason feels true because it's tailored exactly to your current mood. Step 5, you delay. Step 6, you feel a flash of relief, and that relief is the reward that wires the whole loop tighter for next time. Notice where the whole thing turns. It all hinges on step 2, the gap. Every modern productivity hack tries to fight at step 3 or 4. Out-argue the reasons. Feel more motivated. Want it more. That's a losing battle, because by then the negotiation has already started, and the comfort brain is the better lawyer. You will lose the argument. You almost always do. The Stoics figured out something the productivity industry still mostly misses. You don't win the argument. You don't have the argument at all. You act before step 2 even opens. Nobody put it more plainly or more personally than a sick and exhausted emperor talking to himself at dawn. Picture the scene. It's somewhere around the year 170. A military camp on the Danube frontier, the cold, muddy edge of the Roman world. Winter, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and stays. Inside a tent is the most powerful human being on the planet, Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome. He commands legions. He controls more wealth and land than almost anyone in history to that point. And he is miserable. He's chronically ill. Historians think he suffered from serious stomach and chest problems for years. He's fighting a brutal, grinding war he never wanted. A plague is tearing through his empire, killing his people by the thousands. He's lost children. He is tired in a way that goes deeper than sleep. In the dark before dawn, this man, this emperor, does not want to get out of bed. Sit with that for a second, because it's the most reassuring fact in this entire video. The single most disciplined figure in the Western imagination, the philosopher king, the man we quote on motivation posters, he didn't want to get up either. The struggle you feel at 6 in the morning is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's not a modern weakness. It's not the phones, not your generation, not your personal flaw. It is the oldest, most universal human friction there is. An emperor felt it 2,000 years ago, in a tent, in the snow, with the fate of an empire on his shoulders. So what does he do? He doesn't wait for motivation. He doesn't lie there hoping the feeling will pass. He reaches for a notebook, the private journal we now call the Meditations, which he never ever intended for another human to read. These were notes to himself, reminders, a man coaching himself through his own life, on paper, because he knew the emperor's mind was just as breakable as anyone's. Right at the start of Book 5, he writes himself a command for exactly this moment. The sense of it runs like this. At dawn, when you don't want to get out of bed, tell yourself, I have work to do as a human being. Why am I complaining if I'm about to do the very thing I was born to do? Was I made to lie here warm under the blankets, or was I made to act? He goes further. He looks out at the world starting to wake up, the plants doing their work, the birds, the ants, the bees, every one of them rising and getting on with the thing it exists to do, without complaint, without negotiation, without a snooze button. Then he asks himself a brutal, beautiful question. Everything else in nature is already up, already doing its part, and I'm not willing to do mine? That's the move. Notice what it is not. It is not a pep talk. He's not hyping himself up. He's not saying, you've got this, you're amazing, today's going to be great. There's no emotion in it at all. It's colder than that, and far more effective. He's giving himself an order and tying it to identity. Not, I feel like getting up. Instead, this is what a human being does. This is what I was made for. Whether I feel like it isn't on the table, he closed the gap. Before the voice could open negotiations, he'd already answered the only question that mattered, and it wasn't, do I want to? It was, what am I for? Let's go deeper into why this actually works, because it's more clever than it looks. The Stoics were obsessed with a single distinction, the most important idea in their entire system. Some things are up to you. Most things are not. The one thing that is truly completely up to you is your next action, not the outcome, not how you feel, not whether the task is fun, just the choice right now to move. Marcus's dawn rule is that idea turned into a weapon. He doesn't try to control whether he feels like getting up. He knows that's not up to him. Feelings come and go like weather. What's up to him is the single act of throwing off the blanket. So he aims his entire will at the one thing he can control, the action. And he aims it fast, before his mind can drag in all the things he can't control. His tiredness, his mood, his dread of the day ahead. This is the part most people get wrong about discipline. They think disciplined people feel like doing hard things. They don't. Marcus didn't. The disciplined person has simply stopped waiting for the feeling. They've decoupled the action from the mood. They act, and the feeling catches up later. Or it doesn't, and they act anyway. Seneca, another Stoic, hammered the same nail from a different angle. He was obsessed with one specific theft, not money, time. In his letters, he keeps circling back to this idea that we're constantly being robbed of our lives, And the strangest part is that we're often the thief. We hand our time away. We postpone living. We tell ourselves the real start is coming next month, next year, when things settle down. And meanwhile, the actual hours, the only ones we'll ever get, drain away while we wait for a better moment that never arrives. The sense of one of his most famous warnings is this: while we wait to live, life passes us by. Read that again. While we wait to live, life passes. Procrastination, to Seneca, wasn't a productivity problem. It was a slow way of not being alive. Every "I'll do it later" is a small bet that you'll have a later, and a quieter bet that the version of you who shows up later will somehow be braver than the one who's here right now. He won't be. He's you, with less time. Then there's Epictetus, a man born into slavery, who had every reason in the world to say later, to defer his life until conditions improved. He taught the opposite. His message, in effect: stop waiting to become the person you intend to be. Act like that person now, in this action, or you never will. Don't say you'll be disciplined someday. Be disciplined in the very next thing you do, or admit you were never serious. 3 different Stoics, 3 different lives: an emperor, an exile, a former slave, one identical conclusion. The decisive moment is never someday. It's the gap right in front of you, and the only winning move is to act before that gap can fill with reasons. Notice what they were all really fighting. It wasn't difficulty. None of these men were strangers to genuine hardship, real war, real exile, real chains. The thing they kept warning about was sneakier than difficulty. It was deferral. The quiet assumption that the real version of your life starts a little later, once the conditions are right. The Stoics looked at that assumption and called it what it is: a lie you tell yourself to stay comfortable today, paid for with a tomorrow that never actually comes. When tomorrow arrives, it's just today again, with the same gap, the same voice, the same warm bed. There's a line from Marcus that cuts right to the bone of this. The sense of it: you could leave life right now. Let that decide what you do and say and think. That's not morbid, it's clarifying. He's reminding himself that there is no infinite supply of mornings. The delay you're negotiating for isn't free. You're spending something that doesn't come back. Once you really feel that the hours are finite and the later is borrowed against a future you may not get, the whole logic of procrastination collapses. There is no later. There is only this gap, and what you do inside it. That's the whole secret. Not more willpower, less time for the argument. Now let's make this usable, because an idea you can't run at 6 in the morning is just decoration. Modern psychology has actually circled back to exactly what Marcus did, just in different language. I'll label these as modern parallels, not Stoic doctrine, but they line up almost perfectly. The first is the idea of acting on account. You've probably heard a version of it, the popular 5-second rule, the notion that when you have an instinct to act, you have a short window before your brain talks you out of it, and if you simply count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and move on 1, you physically interrupt the negotiation. It's not magic. Here's why it works. Mechanically, counting backwards gives your mind a small, concrete task that crowds out the reasons. You can't build an excuse and count down at the same time. The countdown occupies the exact mental space the voice needs to make its case. By the time you hit 1, there's been no room to open negotiations. You've closed the gap with a number. That is, functionally, what Marcus did with a sentence instead of a number. Same mechanism. Fill the gap with something, a count or a command, so the comfort brain never gets the floor. The second modern parallel is even better supported. Psychologists call it an implementation intention, an if-then plan. The research, going back decades, is surprisingly strong. People who decide in advance exactly when and where and how they'll act are dramatically more likely to follow through than people who just intend to in a fuzzy way. I'll exercise more fails. When my alarm goes off, I put my feet on the floor before I think works, because you've preloaded the decision. You made the choice yesterday calmly, so that this morning's tired negotiating brain has nothing left to decide. The deciding is done. All that's left is the doing. See what both of these have in common with the emperor in the tent. None of them try to win the argument. They all prevent it. They attack step 2, the gap, instead of step 4, the reasons. That's the entire game. Here's how you actually build your own dawn rule. 3 pieces. 1. Pick your command in advance, not in the moment. In the moment, you're too compromised. Right now, calm. Decide on a single line you will say to yourself when the gap opens. It can be Marcus's, almost word for word. I have work to do as a human being. Or make it yours. I don't negotiate before noon. Or just, this is who I am now. The words matter less than the fact that it's decided and it's short. It has to be fast enough to beat the voice. 2. Tie it to a trigger. A command floating in space does nothing. Bolt it to a specific moment. The alarm goes off. That's the trigger. And the rule fires. Feet on the floor, no thinking. You sit at your desk, trigger. And the rule fires. I open the document before I open anything else. The trigger is what makes it automatic. You're not relying on remembering. You're building a tripwire. 3. Move on the command. Every time, even badly. This is the one people skip, and it's the only one that actually matters. The first morning you do this, the voice will still show up. It'll say, this is silly, it won't work. Move anyway. Throw off the blanket on 1 even if you flop back down for a second. Open the document even if all you do is stare at it. You're not trying to feel motivated, you're casting a vote. Every time you act on the command instead of the negotiation, you teach your nervous system a new lesson. The rule is not up for debate. After enough votes, the voice stops bothering to show up. It's learned it can't win. That's the system. A pre-decided command, a trigger, and the willingness to move before you're ready. Marcus did it with a notebook and a sentence. You can do it with a sentence and an alarm. I want to be honest with you about what changes, because it's not what you'd expect. You might think the payoff is that you get more done, and you do. But that's the small prize. The real change is to who you believe you are. Here's what happens, mechanically, over weeks. Every morning you act on the command. You collect a small piece of evidence about yourself. And your self-image is nothing but a pile of evidence. Right now, if you're a chronic procrastinator, you've got years of evidence telling you that you're someone who doesn't follow through. That belief is heavy. It colors everything. You don't start big things because, deep down, you've already predicted you'll quit, and you're usually right because you keep proving it. The dawn rule reverses the evidence, slowly. One morning at a time, you get up on the command, and a quiet voice notes, I did the thing I said I'd do. Do that 100 times and something shifts that no motivation video can give you. You start to trust yourself. Self-trust is the actual engine underneath all discipline. People who follow through aren't gritting their teeth harder than you. They simply expect themselves to follow through. because they've got a mountain of evidence that they will. There's a second thing, and it's almost spiritual in how it feels. When you stop negotiating, the mornings get quieter. Most people don't realize how much noise the negotiation generates. The dread, the guilt, the low background hum of "I should be doing something else." That hum is exhausting. It follows you all day. When you kill the negotiation at the source, that hum goes silent. You're not lighter because you did more. You're lighter because you stopped carrying the argument. Here's the lesson under the lesson. Discomfort doesn't actually last the way you think it does. The voice always tells you the hard thing will feel terrible the whole time. It's lying. The worst moment of almost any task is the moment right before you start. The dread is the peak. Once you're moving, feet on the floor, fingers on the keys, one foot in front of the other, the dread collapses, usually within seconds. Marcus knew this. The misery is in the bed, in the hesitation, in the gap. The instant you act, it's gone. You spend the whole negotiation dreading a pain that disappears the moment you stop negotiating. So the practical lesson is almost embarrassingly simple. The thing you're avoiding is rarely as bad as the avoiding. The gap is where the suffering lives. Close it fast, and you don't just get more done. You free yourself from the worst part of your own day. Now, somewhere in this, a voice in your head, yes, that voice, is already preparing its defense. Sounds nice, but my situation's different. I've tried things like this. It won't work for me. Good. Let's deal with it directly, because that objection is the negotiation wearing its smartest disguise. First, notice the move. The voice can't argue with the logic, so it argues with your eligibility. It concedes the rule might work for other people, just not for you, because you're uniquely tired, uniquely busy, uniquely broken. That's not insight. That's the comfort brain's last play. When it can't beat the idea, it tries to exempt you from it. Don't grant the exemption. Second, and this is the part that should land, the dawn rule has the lowest possible bar of any technique you've ever tried. It doesn't ask you to feel motivated. It doesn't ask you to want it. It doesn't ask you to fix your mindset or heal your past or believe in yourself. It asks for one physical action on a trigger before you think. That's it. The reason other things failed you is that they relied on a feeling you didn't have. This relies on no feeling at all. It's designed for the exact moment you feel nothing but resistance. That's not a weakness of the method. That's the entire point of it. Third, Marcus is the proof. Reread his situation. Chronically ill, at war, grieving, running an empire, exhausted on a level you and I will hopefully never know. If the dawn rule could work for a sick man in a frozen tent with the weight of Rome on him, the idea that your Tuesday is somehow too hard for it doesn't survive contact. He didn't have an easier life than you. He had a harder one. He just had a rule. Here's the reframe that ends the objection for good. You don't have to believe it will work. Belief isn't part of the system. You just have to run it once. Tomorrow morning, when the gap opens, count down and put your feet on the floor, not because you're convinced, but as an experiment. Let the evidence decide, not the voice. The voice has had years to make its case. Give the rule a single morning. Let me leave you with the thing underneath all of this, the part that's bigger than mornings and to-do lists. That little gap, the pause between knowing and doing, isn't just where procrastination lives. It's where your whole life is actually decided. Not in the big dramatic moments. Those are rare. Your life is built in thousands of tiny, unwitnessed gaps every single day where you either move toward the person you want to be or quietly negotiate your way back to comfort. Nobody sees those moments. There's no audience at 6 in the morning, no applause for opening the document instead of the phone. That's exactly why they're sacred. The way you handle the gap when no one is watching, that is your real character, not what you say you value, what you do in the 4 seconds before your brain wakes up enough to argue. Marcus Aurelius understood something that the most powerful position on earth couldn't give him and couldn't take away. The empire wasn't really his. The legions weren't really his. His health, his comfort, the years he had left, none of it was truly up to him. The only thing that was ever fully his was the next action, the decision to rise, to move, to do the thing he was made for, before the warm bed could talk him out of it. That's the strange, freeing truth at the center of all of this. You will not feel like it. Most mornings, most tasks, for the rest of your life, you will not feel like it. The disciplined life was never about feeling like it. It's about discovering that the feeling was never the boss, that you can move while reluctant, act while tired, rise while the whole soft weight of your comfort is begging you to stay down. The voice will always be there. The gap will always open. But now you know its one weakness. It needs time to talk, and you don't have to give it any. Decide your command tonight. Tie it to your alarm. And tomorrow, when the gap opens and the negotiation begins, don't argue, don't motivate yourself. Just count down and move and become, in that one small second, the kind of person who does what they were made to do. The emperor did it in a tent in the snow. Your move is so much easier than his. If this hits something in you, part of you already knows the cost of waiting. Subscribe and stay close, because we're building something here, a whole system for becoming harder to break, calmer, and impossible to stop. The next video goes even deeper, so watch the one on screen now, and let's keep going. Your future self is waiting on the other side of the gap.